Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are in now day 44 of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And again, we have a very important update today about the ongoing war. So, as we know and as we have talked about over the course of the last few days, we know now that the Russians are very much focused on seizing the cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. And we kind of know the direction of advance for those Russian forces. And one of the most important targets for those Russian forces has been the city of Izum, located here as you can see it on my map. Not only the seizing the city of Izum, but establishing a bridgehead. And what the Russians have recently done over the last 48 hours is establish multiple bridgeheads over the Servinsky Donetsk River. And that is very, very important for the Russian cause and a continued successful operation if it desires to eventually seize control of the cities of Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, while at the same time enveloping and cutting off the fortified city of Severodonetsk. More importantly, in terms of some of the manufacturing capabilities of the state of Ukraine are actually inside of the city of Izum and have now been seized by the Russian military. Specifically is this plant right here, is the Izum instrument making plant. This plant, this factory, this facility inside of Izum manufactures most, if not all, of the sensitive optics, or specifically the optical glass required in such systems such as the Stunka Stunka anti-tank guided weapon systems, some of the optronics for Ukrainian armored infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, and other weapon systems that the Ukrainians have deployed in this current conflict. And again, that crucial facility has been taken by the Russian military. And again, not only that, the Russians now have multiple bridgeheads over the main river that runs through the city of Izum, which has allowed now the Russians to kind of break off and are continuing to maneuver and advance towards the city of Sloviansk. So if you look here on the map, you can clearly see the Russians are proceeding down the main highway towards Sloviansk. At the same time, another formation is kind of breaking off more towards the west and looks to encircle both Sloviansk and Kramatorsk kind of from a more westerly direction. So again, you have one force moving down towards Sloviansk along the main Sloviansk to Izum highway, and then also you have this other Russian force that is going to be moving kind of in a more southwesterly direction that looks to cut off Kramatorsk from the rear. Additionally, you have another Russian area of advance within the vicinity of Lyman here. So again, you have the Russian forces coming down through Izum, however you would like to pronounce that. And then obviously you have further Russian forces coming just to the east of Sloviansk as well, coming through the city of Terny, approaching the town of Lyman and other towns just outside of Sloviansk. So clearly you have the Russians approaching Sloviansk from kind of the northwest, also looking for an envelopment operation coming down towards the southwest and encircling Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from the west, as you also have another Russian column attempting a breakthrough near this town of Popasna. And again, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, but again, doing my best job there. But again, you have three different axes of advance that the Russians are attempting in terms of both encircling Severodonetsk, Sloviansk, and Kramatorsk. But again, it's not being you're not hearing much about the seizure of Izum, but more specifically, the seizure of the Izum instrument-making plant that has been taken by the Russian military. And again, we do know now that the Russians have multiple bridgeheads over the Izum crossing point, the main Savrensky Donets River, that the Russians are crossing at least two different points right now. And that was a very, very important battle for the Russians to take control of Izum, and then obviously, more importantly, establish those bridgeheads over and into areas where they could then approach Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from the northwesterly direction. We also continue to see that the Russians are going after the Ukrainian military infrastructure and the ability of the Ukrainian military to kind of move around the country. And unfortunately, we have seen the results of that in Kramatorsk. The main railway station in Kramatorsk, I'm going to take you to that now where you can specifically see that. It's located here on the map where my cursor is circling. We believe this was hit by cruise missiles or long-range rocket fire, possibly Iskanders, or some sort of tactical air-launched missile that struck the railway station and quite possibly killing large numbers of civilians. Now, with that being said, the question remains, was the railway station a legitimate military target? And I would say this: if we go back to World War II, we have plenty of instances where we can physically see that the United States would constantly go after German railway infrastructure. I mean, there's plenty of gun camera footage of Spitfires and Mustangs going after moving rail cars, and multiple gun camera footage of said types of attacks. Now, again, unfortunately, this did result in quite possibly large-scale civilian deaths. So I guess the question is are these legitimate targets? And I would have to say, on the surface, in terms of preventing the Ukrainian military from maneuvering and transporting forces around the country, and specifically transporting forces to Kramatorsk, that is what the Russians are trying to do right now, is, again, interdict and prevent the movement of Ukrainian forces in the eastern area of operation. And in all likelihood, obviously, the Kramatorsk railway station, quite possibly the Sloviansk railway station, and a number of others, unfortunately, for those Ukrainian civilians, are probably going to be targeted by the Russian military. And obviously, we can expect to see further attacks on Ukrainian transportation nodes by the Russian military as it attempts to curtail the movement of Ukrainian forces in the eastern portions, and quite literally all over Ukraine proper. We'll continue to see that. Right now, we've seen the Russian military. So far, they've fired off approximately 1,600 cruise missiles. That is a significant amount of cruise missiles that have been fired into the Ukraine. And even if we say that, let's say 50%, worst case scenario, 50% are malfunctioning, that's still 700, 800 aim points that have been hit by Russian cruise missiles throughout the Ukraine. So absolutely a significant amount of munitions being expended by the Russians on targets in and around the Ukraine. But right now, what we're seeing both to the northwest of Kramatorsk, east of Kramatorsk, south of Kramatorsk, is really where the war is shaping up to be right now. We're also hearing that the Russian military is conducting a very large buildup near Belgorod. We anticipate and believe that a lot of the forces that were operating northwest and northeast of Kiev, again, a lot of these forces are now being moved into the Belgorod area of operations for an anticipated operations against Kharkiv. Again, this is going to be a major objective by the Russian military at some point to focus on either encircling, enveloping, and then reducing Kharkiv in order to basically conquer it and take control of it. And that is going to be a pivotal requirement for the Russians to capture this city. Now, with that being said, as I've talked about before, just because of the nature of Kharkiv, that is going to be an incredibly tough military objective to overcome. And I would anticipate that we probably won't see an all-out assault or attempt to fully envelop Kharkiv until operations near Kramatorsk and Sloviansk are completed. I think the Russians are going to start taking a much more prudent and step-by-step and methodical approach to this campaign, as opposed to kind of the haphazard operations it initially launched with multiple very, very wide-ranging goals at the start of this campaign. So again, at the start of this campaign, we observed the Russians make moves towards Kiev, Chernihiv, Konotop, Sumy, and a host of other cities in the northwestern area of operations. And again, at the same time, they were continuing to press towards Mykolaiv, Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhzhia, and a host of other southern cities as well. And I think they bit off more than they could chew in terms of these wide-ranging operations. Now, obviously, is it possible we have another operational commander? Do we have unity of command now within the Russian forces, where you have one key leader leading this operation and who has decided to take a much more methodical, step-by-step approach to this operation? I think that's very, very possible, and we're starting to see what I would define as much more prudent decision-making processes by the Russian military in its ongoing campaign against Ukraine. And again, probably should have conducted this sort of operation at the beginning. But again, it sounds like the more aggressive of the two plans were initially chosen, and I get it. I understand that if that plan would have worked, it's quite possibly the war would have ended. It would have already possibly have ended. But again, it was a very, very high risk plan in which a lot of the planning was focused on if and hopefully that the Ukrainian military would not fight. And a lot of Ukrainian military units would simply give up and quite possibly switch sides. And there may have been some intelligence operations in the background in which the Russians were actively hoping that they had compromised some of these Ukrainian battlefield commanders. And unfortunately for the Russians, that did not happen. Most, if not all, Ukrainian maneuver brigades are actively fighting, and the Ukrainian military, and more importantly, the Ukrainian population, is continuing to mobilize and fight against the Russian invasion. And under that, the initial operation to grab Kiev or attempt to probe Kiev to just see how much resistance was there on the ground, and unfortunately for the Russians, they did meet what I would define as maximum resistance. So again, this whole I think this whole initial plan by the Russians has fallen apart, especially again some of those operations in the Northwest, and it looks like more pragmatic and reasonable plans have been instituted in terms of taking down Ukraine in a more methodical, step-by-step approach. Can the Russians still conquer Ukraine? I don't know. Again, that's going to be, and I've said this from the very beginning, that would be incredibly difficult, and I believe that we would have to see full mobilization by the Russian state in order for that to occur. I thought it more likely that we would see the Russians attempt to take control of all land areas east of the Dnieper River, and I think that still is a very good possibility with this more of this step-by-step methodical approach that the Russians are now using. Now, is success guaranteed? Absolutely not. Again, a lot of what happens right now is going to be contingent on what happens on the battlefield. And does the Russian military continue to fight? Does it continue to maneuver? Does it have good leaders on the ground? At the same time, is the Ukrainian military wearing out? Is it being bombed into oblivion, although not being reported as much? But again, the Ukrainian military is eating a lot of cruise missiles, and a lot of ordnance are being dropped and fired at Ukrainian forces. And yes, the Ukrainian forces are taking significant casualties. Although, again, you turn on Western media, and obviously you listen to Ukrainian state media, and obviously the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, they would have you believe that obviously the Russians are taking many, many more casualties than the Ukrainian military. And I don't believe that's the case. I think the Ukrainians, again, are indeed taking quite a few casualties in this ongoing war, especially when you consider that 1,600 cruise missiles have been fired by the Russian Federation against targets inside of the Ukraine. And that does not include all the other systems that the Russians are using as well against Ukrainian forces as this war continues. We continue to see Ukrainian forces attempt limited counterattacks northwest of the city of Kherson. And we understand that the Russian military has prevented several of these counterattacks and blunted several of these counterattacks by Ukrainian forces, and continues to hold areas, fairly large areas, to the west of the Dnieper River, and continue to hold these areas. And again, right now you can clearly see that the Russian plan is to hold Kherson and to hold a footprint on the west bank of the Dnieper River, specifically around Kherson. And again, this would be a launching point for further operations into Odessa, but I think we're quite a bit off from that operation happening. I think first the Russians are going to have a successful operation near Kramatorsk and Sloviansk and achieve an envelopment of Ukrainian forces to the west of Severodonetsk, and then obviously seize these towns and all this terrain in the southeast. But they have not done that yet. Right now, they are on the road to doing that, again, with those bridgeheads that have been established across Izum, and the seizure of Izum is definitely a optimistic sign if you are a supporter of the Russians and the Russian ongoing operation into Ukraine. But again, one other subject I wanted to touch on real quick, and I apologize. The mobilization of the Russian Federation. We've received reports that, in fact, the Russians could be doing more or less somewhat of a clandestine mobilization, where we've heard reports that all prior conscripts and contract service members going back to 2012 are now being asked to report for duty, and that would entail a 3-month training program to get those forces, get those personnel that have served in the Russian military after 2012 up to about 2020. So that would be a very significant amount of personnel for the Russians to be recalling, if in fact we can verify this is true, and that would more or less verify again more of a clandestine mobilization by the Russian military to refill its personnel ranks. Obviously, the Russian military has taken, by its own admission, significant casualties. I mean, we've seen Russian spokespersons say that now, and you cannot deny some of the footage that we have seen throughout the course of this conflict that indeed indicates the Russians have taken some casualties in this conflict. Even the self-reporting of by the Ministry of Defense, by the Russian Ministry of Defense, a few weeks ago, where it had reported that 1,300 military personnel had been killed, over 3,000 wounded, and then compounding that, the Russian separatist forces also reported that they had lost well over 700 personnel KIA'd and about 1,800 personnel wounded. So again, if you look at those total numbers, and again, for all intents and purposes, those separatist forces are acting as verified members of the Russian military. So as of a few weeks ago, the Russians were basically reporting almost 3,000 KIA'd and several thousand more wounded. So again, those are fairly significant casualties. Now, how much greater are those casualty levels and what is being reported? Very difficult to say at this point. But as of several weeks ago, the U.S. Department of Defense believed that anywhere between 4,000 and 7,000 Ukrainian service members had been, in fact, KIA'd in the ongoing operations taking place. So neither side is obviously revealing the full extent of casualties, but we can anticipate, given the nature of operations and the high intensity of this war, that both sides have indeed taken significant casualties. And I spoke before, you're seeing a European conflict with two European industrialized nations fighting each other, and with very large population bases, very large. Both have a very large military-industrial complex, and continue to fight each other in a very tenacious manner. Furthermore, also reports are coming in from actually the U.S. Department of Defense that the United States has handed over so many Javelin anti-tank guided weapon systems to Ukraine that U.S. inventories are now getting alarmingly low. And it would appear that the United States is now ramping up emergency production of the Javelin missile system, because so many Javelin anti-tank guided weapon systems have been handed over to Ukrainian forces. So, food for thought, and just in terms of the sheer volume of equipment that is being handed over to the Ukrainian military by the United States and other NATO partners. So, again, a lot of what we're seeing on the ground and a lot of this resistance to the Russian military can be attributed to the fact that NATO is a very active participant, other than actually having troops on the ground. And even then, I would say there, in all likelihood, there are clandestine elements on the ground directly supporting the Ukrainian military in its operations against the Russians. So that's kind of where we're at for the day. I hope everybody enjoyed the video. We'll have more information soon. And again, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.